Top of the morning to you and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Olumide Macaulay. The headlines. Russia says force repels Ukrainian attacks. Ukraine reports it launches air assaults. Netherlands, Denmark commits to delivery F-16s to Ukraine. Plus, Russian President Vladimir Putin meets top generals in charge of Russia's war efforts in Ukraine. Thank you for joining us. Russia says that its forces have hit more Ukrainian targets and repelled attacks in several directions, while Ukraine claimed its forces launched multiple airstrikes and shelling on Russian positions. On Sunday, the Russian Defense Ministry issued a battle report saying the Russian army repelled the Ukrainian attack in directions of Kupiansk, Zaporizhia, Krasny Liman, and Donetsk, amongst others. In addition, the Russian army destroyed multiple Ukrainian ammunition depots in Kherson and Donetsk. The Russian air defense troops also intercepted rockets fired by HIMARS multiple rocket launches and destroyed many drones from Ukraine. On the same day, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces also issued a report saying that in the past 24 hours, the Russian forces shelled regions such as Sumy, Chernihiv, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kharkov, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. The report said Ukrainian army continues offensive operations in the directions of Melitopol and Berdyansk, while the country's air forces launched multiple strikes on the concentrations of Russian troops and equipment. At least 5 people have been injured in a drone attack in the Russian city of Kursk. According to the regional governor, Roma Starovoit, a fire broke out when the drone hit the railway station. Russia said Ukrainian drones had struck 3 separate regions over the weekend and that 2 of Moscow's airports were temporarily closed to divert flights. The Rostov region, which, like the Kursk region, shares a border with Ukraine, also reported drone strikes. However, no one was injured in that attack. Meanwhile, Russian air defenses shot down multiple drones over the southwestern Belgorod region over the weekend, as according to local authorities and the country's military. The Defense Ministry has confirmed the destruction of 3 unmanned aerial aircraft in the area, which it blamed on Kiev and called a terrorist attack. According to the ministry, the drones were downed in an unpopulated area, avoiding any casualties or material damage on the ground. The governor of Belgorod initially said at least 12 aerial targets had been downed outside the city. The officials revised this figure later in the day, confirming that only 3 targets had been shot down, with an initial assessment of the situation having suggested the incident did not cause any damage on the ground. Russia's envoy to Belarus, Boris Gryzlov, has warned that Moscow will treat any attack on Belarus as an act of aggression against itself, using all of its military capabilities to retaliate. Speaking at a televised interview, the individual who previously served as Russian Interior Minister warned any third parties against targeting the country's main ally. Hitting at the option of a nuclear strike, Gryzlov says, in his words, Russian President Vladimir Putin clearly said that in the event of an attack on Belarus, we will treat this as an attack on Russia. The military doctrine of the Russian Federation entails, in such a case, a response with all our weaponry. Russia and Belarus have ramped up their military cooperation since the start of the conflict between Moscow and Kiev. Earlier this year, Russia announced the deployment of its nuclear weapons in Belarus following repeated requests from Minsk to do so. The Belarusian leadership cited aggressive Western policy and the perceived threat posed by U.S. nuclear weapons hosted by European allies in Washington. A quick update now on the drone attack on the Russian city of Kursk. We told you earlier that 5 people were injured in the railway station strike. But the governor, Roman Starovoit, has announced that one of the station's platforms have been temporarily closed. However, passengers will still be able to board and depart trains on 2 other platforms in the station. He also added that the roof and facade were also affected and there was damage to a waiting room and pedestrian tunnel. Kursk region borders Ukraine and has seen previous apparent Ukrainian attacks. Speaking of attacks, a Russian missile strike killed 7 people, including a 6-year-old child, and wounded at least 129 others in the Ukrainian city of Chernihiv. The Ukrainian Interior Ministry said people had been on their way to church to celebrate a religious holiday when the missile struck a central square in the historic northern Ukrainian city. It also said in a later statement that 15 of the wounded were children and 15 were police officers. The roof of the neoclassical theater was turned off by the strike, which also blew out doors and windows in neighboring apartment buildings and storefronts. A wounded woman said her friend pulled her out of one of the damaged buildings after a part of the ceiling fell on her head. She said in her words, "If it was not for her, I wouldn't be alive. She pulled me out. Fire broke out in a second. It was a nightmare." Ukrainian media reported that a public event featuring drone manufacturers had been taking place inside the theater at the time of the attack. Both sides in Russia's 18-month-old invasion have widely used drones on the battlefield. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte says the Netherlands and Denmark will definitely give F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine once conditions have been met, as Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky visited the country. Rutte said that the Netherlands has 42 F-16s available in all, but it's still too early to say whether all of them will be donated. Mr. Zelensky didn't say the exact number of aircraft and added that the amount of Ukrainian pilots that will be trained should remain a secret not to prepare Russia. He called the deal a breakthrough agreement which will help strengthen Ukraine's air defenses and help its counter-offensive.
It's always good to talk with you, usually on the phone, but sometimes we get to speak in person. Today we can announce that the Netherlands and Denmark commit to transfer F-16 aircraft to Ukraine and the Ukrainian Air Force, in close cooperation with the United States and other partners, once the conditions for such a transfer have been met. We are looking into whether we can supply all the remaining planes or that still stuff has to be done to update them, or maybe it is not possible. So the exact number I cannot give you, but we are working from the fact that at this moment we still have 42 in stock here in the country.
I can't tell you very concrete number of our Ukrainian pilots because I don't want to prepare Russia to this surprise, which we will prepare them in some period of time. But anyway, we have political decision. We understand the number of jets we can use in the future, nearest or not. It depends on the situation and on the experience of our pilots. It's truth, and on preparing special infrastructure also for jets.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Meanwhile, the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen says the country will supply Ukraine with 19 F-16 fighter jets during a joint news conference with Ukraine's president at an airbase in Denmark. The pledge is the first real promise of F-16s for Ukrainian armed forces and comes a few days after the United States approved the possible delivery of fighter jets by the 2 countries. Frederiksen said she hopes other countries will also follow suit and that 70 Ukrainians had arrived for training on the first Western aircraft Ukraine will be receiving.
Today we announced that we will donate 19 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. Together with the Netherlands, we are the first country to make a solid and concrete commitment to donate Western fighter jets. And hopefully others will follow now. We have seen it today. More than 70 people from Ukraine is now on the ground here in Sønderjylland, preparing for training. This is a decision about defending Ukraine. So the purpose of this donation is to defend Ukraine and the country. And on the concrete questions, when are we planning to deliver? Well, the screening is going on now. The training will soon be starting, and hopefully around New Year, the first group of planes will be leaving Denmark, going to Ukraine, around 6, and then hopefully next year, 8 more planes are leaving Denmark for Ukraine, and then the year after, 5 planes.
As the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. Now we are joined by Mr. Oluseyi Adeyemo, African Affairs Analyst, who joins us from out of Lagos, Southwest Nigeria. A very good morning to you and a warm welcome to the program.
Good morning, Olumide. Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure to be on your program.
It's always a pleasure to indeed have you. We've heard from these two prime ministers, these two leaders of Denmark and Netherlands. I think we can revise what we reported earlier from the Dutch leader about the number of planes that they will be handing over to Ukraine. First, they said there will be batches of 5, 6, and 8. Now, and experts have opined that when these planes, which will not be in use, according to experts, until January 2024, do arrive, they will not probably be game changers, but they'll help Ukraine stay in the game. For you, does this exacerbate the situation or create a more level playing field for Ukraine versus Russia?
Okay, the important thing is they're showing support. They're bringing all of what they can bring to the table onto the table. It is clear to all of us now that the fight is actually a drone fight. Drone is being deployed, and it is clear that Ukraine is really, showing the world that they're able to build all of this drone in short term. It's amazing because truth of the matter is all of these went there before this war started. But in the short term, they've been able to build this drone, and really that is what is most potent of their arsenal, as it were. So all of this air power, which is very necessary, that will come in, like we all have learned, not earlier than January, which also will require a lot of training and all of that, is good for the richness or the potency and strength of Ukraine, because at the end of the day, one of the other things you do in war is you show your strength. You show how much you have, how much you can deploy, even though you're not deploying them now. You need to show your opponent or your enemy that those things are there. And the fact that Europe is united behind Ukraine is really very critical at a time like this. So in my opinion, I think that's what the purpose this will serve for now.
As a child, I was always fascinated by reading the accounts of air dogfights between the Germans and the Axis, the Allied powers, during World War II. This formed that was obviously because after World War II, a whole genre of literature came out. There were comic books, there were historical documents, there were documentaries, and it glorified, as it were, these dogfights in the air, and it sensationalized air combat, and it brought a whole new dimension to how Germany prosecuted their war against the Allied powers. Is there a concern now that if this fight does go to the skies, we're going to have dogfights in the skies, we're going to have more casualties on the ground, because we understand that these F-16 fighter jets have so many capabilities. They're multi-purpose, they're hypersonic, some of them can carry nuclear weapons, they're surface to air, air to air, and Russia has said that if F-16s do get into the hands of Ukrainians, they will take the battle to them in like manner?
I said it severally on this program that my prayer and hope is that we would be able to find a way to diplomatically end this as early as possible. Truth is, as long as this goes on, we all can determine, how badly it will go, because a added to the fight is more trouble, more likelihood for it to become messier, more likelihood for more people to be, joined in the fight. NATO has done a wonderful job, in my opinion, as being diplomatic, trying to avoid them being directly linked to it. But of course, it is clear that is a NATO fight. And like I said, in my opinion, they've done a great job by holding back and making sure that Russia does not see them at the forefront. But if this continues, you will find situations like they're having with Belarus right now, where other countries will be brought into the center of the fight, and it will continue to expand. And that is why I will continue to hope and pray that as early as possible, one way or the other, the diplomatic option, which in my opinion is the best option, will be employed and deployed so that we all can get back to our lives. Because as it stands, the longer this war comes, the more dangerous and messier it may become.
Parallels have been drawn with the Second World War and the First World War because of the dimension of the invasion of this Russian military force crossing into another country's territory. Many of the countries, such as Poland, such as Germany, may have painful memories of this affair, especially given the fact that in the case of Germany, it was their country that was the spearhead of the nefarious, despicable Adolf Hitler, who ended up killing 6 million Jews, not to talk of the other murders that occurred during World War II. Do you think that part of this support, of which Germany is arguably the second largest provider of military aid, equipment, and finance to Ukraine, is also because they remember what happened in the days of the Third Reich, and no one wants it to happen again?
Obviously, none of us. I mean, like you just said, you read it in the comic. It didn't even happen here, but we all can't forget what happened to our world. I mean, some of us were not alive, but we read about it, and we are not hoping that will happen. But let me shock you. The kind of equipment that have been deployed so far, it seems to me that what is happening right now is very close. We're in Third World War already because of the level of deployment. Yes, Russia have done a great job by insulating its people. The average Russian, yes, have an idea of what is going on, but it is not affecting their daily life. And Russia have done a good job in ensuring that it does not affect people as much, which is why I believe Ukraine is ensuring that, they're dropping all the things they're dropping right now for the Russians to also see what they are going through. So as it is right now, the kind of drone that have gone into this, the kind of people that have died, kind of, high-powered, arsenals have been deployed. We're already in World War III, and I pray again that whatever can be done by the rest of the world, America, Europe, to ensure that we get out of this as early as possible. Because you see, you really can never tell. As long as this continues, and as it is, from what we're all analyzing, it is clear that this is going to go way into next year. We're already talking about January. I mean, we're still in August. We're talking January already, and January, how much what will happen between now and then. Look at the numbers of people who die every day, kind of destruction that is going on. So for me, yes, everybody remember. And it is not a good memory. We all pray, and I know that cuts across the whole world. I mean, I know that the Pope was praying yesterday or day before yesterday about this war and was, employing and, sort of, speaking to the world and saying he hopes and pray that this will stop. So yes, all of us remember what happened, and in one way or the other, we pray that it never happens again. But in some kind of way, we are already in World War III.
We hope we won't be in World War III practically. This could be a precursor to it, obviously, and we hope that other countries won't engage each other, which essentially is what a world war is, apart from these two countries. And obviously, that's why NATO is being very frugal with accepting Ukraine into its fold against the dictates of its policy. But to the drones that you mentioned, Ukraine says that they're about to spend or invest over $1 billion in manufacturing of drones and equipment, which is an advantage the Russians have because they're manufacturing their equipment, and the Russians are making, according to them, more equipment in a month than they did the entire duration of last year. So that's one of the advantages that they have. Mr. Adeyemo, do we go back to the drawing board now as far as mediation goes? And who can be the catalyst for this revival of peace talks? Because it appears after the Saudi Arabia conference, not much has been said.
So just China. We definitely must go to the drawing board and continue to go to the drawing board as long as this war stands. Until we're able to get it out of our way, we must stay on the drawing board. As the fight goes on, we all must continue to negotiate. That would suggest China. China, why? Because in some way it is clear that they stand in a way more like, in the center of this. You see what happened between the U.S. and, Japan and Southern Korea at the summit that went on. And in some way, China is saying, okay, are you sure this is not targeted at us and all of that? So I really do not know what the game plan is for the U.S. and, Japan and South Korea. Japan and South Korea. I hope that they will be able to, from that, deploy a negotiation tool where they will be able to impress it on China, because it is clear that they play some kind of strategic role in all of this, where they'll be able to speak to Russia and let Russia understand that, look, we all do not need this. It's not helping us in any way. It is obviously negatively impacting on them, on the rest of the world. People are dying on a daily basis that is avoidable, that we all can do away with. And for those who try this, Saudi Arabia, I think they should not give up. With negotiations like this, you really don't have it overnight. You then talk and talk and talk, and sometimes it seems that you're not making an headway. But what you do really is to continue with it, because at the end of the day, we have seen all over the world and over the years in our lives that we always end up back at the table. So, in my opinion, as key to this war, the table should not be broken. Getting back to the table is something we cannot afford to do away with. And we just need to continue to talk to ourselves. Turkey should please not give up. They should also try as much as they can and see how much they can bring to the table and, sort of mediate and speak the conscience of Putin particularly, because I believe that if he starts to look at this in a different manner, maybe all of this will be easier for all of us than it is right now.
We hope Turkey doesn't indeed give up. But it's interesting you mentioned China, because when it comes to influence with Russia, the first name that pops up is China. China's coming up out of the woodwork. China's in the bedroom, the living room, the kitchen. China's like the Jackie Chan of mediation for Russia. But China, having attended the Saudi Arabia conference, which was lauded by all and sundry, in the same breath, the next day or 2 days afterwards, their defense minister is cozying up with the Russian defense minister. And they're talking about improving their strategic military cooperation and being fast allies that cannot be separated. So is China indeed the alternative for countries to turn to? We have the European leaders saying that China should talk to Russia. China should talk to Russia. China has been talking to Russia. The Chinese minister was in Russia for 6 days, but nothing came of it.
Illuminator is the reason, for the things you just said, are the reason why China is probably the most probable option. They're the ones, like you rightly described, who go into the bedroom, who come out of the bedroom. And they need to also hold on to that. You see, in negotiation, You can't talk to me if it's clear that I don't have access to you. Now, China is doing a good job, in my opinion, by keeping friendship, by showing to Russia that whatever we say out of love. We're not saying it because we are like the rest of the people who truly hate you, who believe you're the dragon in the house. We believe that you're a good person. We believe that you're good people. You're our ally. We've done a lot of stuff together, and we intend to continue to do things with you. We don't want to break our relationship with you. And so it's for that reason that they're the best candidate to this job, because it is only your ally that can speak to you. It is only your ally that you can listen to. And so China clearly is that. That's why everybody is pointing to them. They're the best candidate, and I hope, and they have the potential to, because, like I said, in some way they're also looking at situations where neighbors are forming ally, and they also need to be cautious in all of this. As they form or sort of prosecute marriage between them. I'm trying to use a proper word, as they sort of make sure they have a marriage with Russia. They also need to also make sure that they don't completely divorce their neighbors. They can't afford to be enemies with all those who surround them. Yes, in some way, Russia is also their neighbor, up there. But they are the ones, in my opinion, that would do the best of job at this time, because they are sort of on side. They understand they will lose if they completely disassociate themselves with their neighbors and the rest of the world. They also understand that they cannot afford to disconnect with their long-standing friendship and family member, which is Russia. And so it is them that we can go through. And I also believe that US also needs to start to learn strategies like that. The ones they've shown with Japan and South Korea is a big one. I hope and pray that they would also extend it and have such summit with China as well, and start to talk to other people better than they used to do, because in some way, in one way or the other, they also call people in all of this, because they've shown themselves as some superpower, and some people already see them from afar and they have their guards up. And I think they would have been the most qualified if they were more diplomatic in the way they're related to Russia, for instance, and China. They probably will have been able to do this job better for all of us.
Mr. Adeyemo, further to this point, when hatred gets personal, it can become murderous. And when hatred becomes institutionalized, it can become genocide, as in the case of Nazi Germany, the extermination of Jews and millions of other people in that particular fatal encounter. In this case, where people are dying, and this morning we reported the death of a 6-year-old child, and just the other day, last week, there was a report of a baby that was just weeks old that perished. That these sorts of incidents will cause hatred to fester between these two close countries who are just divided by a border, that these countries who are supporting Ukraine or supporting Russia have a responsibility to bring them back to the negotiating table once again, because in the case of this 6-year-old child, we don't know whether the mother is going to have a baby again, another child. Maybe that's the last child the mother can have, and that's the child taken away by the war. That's just a microcosm of what's happening in Ukraine. And also the Russians as well, who are following the orders of the government. So the nations have more of a responsibility to be the bigger man and bring these two nations to the negotiating table so that peace can reign.
We clearly do not have a choice. Everybody sees it clearly. I mean, like, apart from the scenario you just painted, lives have been lost. Dreams, nobody is dreaming to become anything again in Ukraine as we speak, because a lot of things have been disrupted. A lot of Africans who were studying Ukraine had to go through the bush out of there. Some of them have not gotten school. Some of them, life have been destroyed. Food is expensive all over the world, in America as well, because for whatever reason, strategically, grains of Ukraine and Russia is a grain we all feed on. And so that is why this war must end now. And everything all of us can do, because we're all feeling front. I mean, apart from what we're seeing physically and those who are, directly affected, we're all affected in one way or the other. When people analyze, when they're talking about anything in any economic conference, they will talk about COVID and they'll talk about Russia and Ukraine. You can't take it out of the table. It is in the center of everything. And for one strange reason, it's a very peculiar time for the rest of the world. The hurricane, in Hawaii, the hurricane that is also, at their door in Canada right now. It's definitely not a time where anybody can go to rest. It's a time where all of us must be alert and we must preach peace, peace, peace. It's because the world barely need peace, because we've had it a little too rough since COVID-19. It is really, I really can't say we really had a good respite, as it were. I mean, Sudan is dealing with theirs, we're dealing with ours right now, which is over our head as regards Niger and all of that. So a lot of wrong is just going on everywhere. There's fear, there is apathy, there is so much worry everywhere. And so this is the time for all of us to see that, a peaceful world, we all deserve a peaceful world, and we have right now. And so whatever word, and I must commend and I'm not trying to patronize your TV station. I mean, you've done a great job by keeping these on air every day since it started. And I mean, in one way or the other, you've had people contributed, spoken to it, and that is all we need. We need to just continue to say whatever we can say. We never can tell. Maybe one of these things could get to the right places. Somebody will hear somewhere, and we then can have people who need to take the right step. Because obviously, I believe that all of us have learned great lesson from this. US, Europe, and all of that. I'm sure we're asking ourselves a question of how peacefully we're living with our neighbors, and how better can we do that? Maybe acquiring all of these nuclear weapons and acquiring all these weapons of war probably is not the best way to build our world. Maybe what we need to do is to find a way of living, more harmoniously amongst ourselves. Because at the end of the day, when we deploy all of this arsenal that we have in our city, we all will always come back to negotiating and discussing with ourselves, because that is probably the best way to live amongst ourselves. Definitely not in ourselves, because we all can see it. I mean, I see all the reports you're putting up, and these are not very, very good things to continue to behold every day. They're gory sight, and we just pray that one day, very soon, we will not see all of these things again on our TVs.
Indeed, and if anyone doubts that the world is a global village, just remember the pandemic that happened just yesterday, or the bubonic plague that happened much longer ago. But Mr. Adeyemo, many thanks. Your specialty is African affairs, but you have gone out of your way to share with us your knowledge on the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Much appreciated. Thank you for making out the time to be with us, Mr. Oluseyi Adeyemo, African affairs analyst who joined us from out of Lagos.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
After the break, Russia's Luna 25 smashes into moon in failure. Moscow probes the crash. Details in a moment. Please stay with us.
Millions of people living together in one community, working together in the same trade. We go into their midst, find out how they live and work.
Oh my goodness, food business is not an easy business.
I spent more than 35 years for this community.
We tell these stories and how they survive in this economy. Community Report, we tell your story.
It begins when news breaks, but there's much more in the details. That's where Special Report comes into the picture, locating source and destination of the news.
Something needs to be done. We don't need to negotiate that. Government should see what we are doing.
Bringing your perspective to the fore.
If those arrested are those protesting against police brutality, I would say that such arrest is unjustified.
Exploring angles that may provide solutions, giving you the opportunity to understand the issues and make decisions. Watch Special Report on Channels Television.
Welcome to the Soul for More stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson met with the Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky over the weekend to discuss military support for the country amidst the latest Russian missile attack in the northern Ukrainian city of Chernihiv. Kristersson expressed his condolences while holding a joint press conference with President Zelensky at his country retreat in Harpsund. Sweden has been aiding Ukraine's war efforts by supplying weapons such as tanks, anti-aircraft systems, and armored Type 90 infantry fighting vehicles. Last week, Swedish Defense Minister Paul Johnson said the government was planning a new $313.5 million military support package to Ukraine, consisting mainly of ammunition and spare parts to previously delivered weapon systems.
Our discussions today have, of course, focused on how Sweden, Europe, and countries all around the globe that stand with you can support you in the best possible way. As you know, since February last year, Sweden has provided Ukraine with 2.2 billion euros in bilateral support, and we will continue to provide political, military, humanitarian, and financial support in close dialogue with you and our common partners to make sure that Ukraine's needs are met for as long as it takes. In this regard, I warmly welcome today's statement of intent, signed here just a few minutes ago at Harpsund, a concrete sign of the joint desire of Sweden and Ukraine to strengthen cooperation on production, training, and servicing of the CV90 platform.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has visited the commander of operations in Ukraine, another top military brass, a meeting that came after Ukraine claimed counteroffensive gains on the southeastern front. According to the Kremlin, Mr. Putin, Russia's Supreme Commander-in-Chief, listened to reports from Valery Gerasimov, the Chief of General Staff of the Army, in charge of Moscow's operations in Ukraine, and other top military commanders and officers. The Kremlin did not provide any additional details of the meeting, and it was not clear when the meeting took place. Videos published by the news agencies involved show Gerasimov greeting President Putin in what appeared to be a nighttime and leading him into a building after a brief handshake. Rostov-on-Don, a city just some 100 kilometers from Ukraine's border, is home to the Russian Southern Military District Command, whose army is fighting in Ukraine. And now, the BRICS Summit is the talk of the town. Matters arising we will discuss with Channels Television business correspondent Ini John Mekwa. Ini, good morning.
Good morning. Happy Monday.
Very happy Monday to you. Thank God it's Monday. We hope that those involved in this conflict have a cherry disposition in spite of the... It's hard to say that, but
it is hard.
We hope that spirits are kept up and good eventually comes out of this. But for the BRICS Summit, what are the more salient issues you think are the priority for the countries involved?
Yeah, a lot of things.
South Africa, Brazil, China.
A lot of things are coming up in expectation for that meeting, which starts tomorrow, runs through to Thursday. A lot of side meetings, and President Ramaphosa, who is the host, has invited President Bola Tinubu. So we'll see. I haven't heard if the president is going to be there, but of course we will watch and see. But there's so many things.
Well, he was in France for the business-centered meeting not too long after his inauguration, so maybe...
Yeah, it was in France, and the vice president was in Russia for the Russia-Africa summit. So, I mean, this one we're looking to see if the President Bola Tinubu, will respond, you know, to it. It was touted earlier that Nigeria also wants to be a part of BRICS, but we don't know how far that is. We have not heard from the presidency, especially this administration. Perhaps it was a thought in the previous administration, you know, the administration by Buhari, but we do not know for this administration. We don't know his thoughts about it. But I mean, BRICS is starting tomorrow, so
wouldn't it be to our advantage if Nigeria was a member of BRICS?
Yeah, well, truth is, BRICS is getting more powerful. So far, they account for about 42% of the world's population. They account for a quarter of global gross domestic products and 18% of trade, global trade. So they are making moves, and because of the people or the countries that are asking to be members, Saudi Arabia wants to be a member. And you know what Saudi Arabia controls when it comes to oil? You know, if Saudi Arabia is admitted, UAE is a shareholder of the BRICS Bank. You know, we talked about bonds that were sold last week about the BRICS Bank, and UAE holds shares there. Egypt holds shares there. Bangladesh holds shares there, and these countries want to be members. So imagine if already we have a quarter of the world GDP being controlled by them. That's 25%. If you have up to 30, 40, or half of the world's GDP being controlled by a bloc, then that bloc can actually make some decision, make some pronouncement that the world will have to listen to. But they also have their own issues, because you know that major members like India and China, they have border issues. So that can also be a distraction to their unity. You know, but these are part of the things they're going to discuss at the meeting, a whole lot that they're going to discuss. For instance, they want to challenge global institutions that are being controlled by the West now, the IMF, the World Banks, and all of that. Already, they have started giving out loans. You know, they have funds set out for emerging economies to borrow from, you know, like Nigeria just went to Afrexim Bank and all of that. You have the IMF and the World Bank and all of that, you know. So they are trying to be an alternative, but how well they can do it is also another thing, because the West has been on this for a very long time. But now they have their funds after the bonds that they did last week. They have some funds also in the BRICS Bank. They call it Development Bank, New Development Bank. You know, they're supposed to represent like the World Bank. You know, the issue of having a currency, obviously that's a very long thing. We've been fighting or trying to get equal, you know, in West Africa, to get a currency that will work amongst us. Even Europe, that has common currency, we see the trouble they go into, because different countries grow at different pace. So when you try to peg them together, it becomes a problem. It's worse in Africa. So to get them, that's BRICS, that has countries from different parts of the world, to now have a common currency, that's going to be a very big deal. So what they're settling for, part of what they're also going to discuss, is going to be encouraging trade with local currencies. But the discouraging fact to that is, even as we speak, BRICS trade among members is very, very low. I think less than 10% or something like that. You know, so you see that there's a long road to success.
Because geographically speaking, culturally speaking, you couldn't have stranger bedfellows than Brazil, India, China, South Africa.
And South Africa.
If Nigeria gets in the mix, that's a good thing. But does that create an opportunity for these countries as well to try and put in a word to President Putin on the Russian invasion? You think?
Exactly, yeah. Well, you know, it's, but you know, the problem is, if you're going to have a say anywhere, you must have power. You must have something that you are presenting. You must have something that you are offering. If you are just going there to beg, or you're just going to BRICS to get what economic benefits you can get, or get people to buy your product or to borrow you money, you know, you don't have a lot of say. Right. Russia is a big country that has developed itself over the years. For you to tell President Putin what to do, except you were
leverage.
Yeah, what are you offering him?
Right.
Do you understand? So it's not just about everybody. Even the Pope has intervened in the war, and the Pope hasn't been able to get President Putin to lay down his arms. You know, so even if BRICS wants to go into this, what do they have to tell President Putin, we're sorry for whatever sentiment or negative sentiment Ukraine has brought up. We are offering you this if you will lay down your arms. Because President Putin does have his own vision and his objective, and is going to tell you, this is what I want to achieve. Can you afford it?
Indeed.
What do you have to offer?
We can be sure that the minister, the foreign minister, or who will attend, and
he's going to join via video.
Via video link, will have a definite agenda.
Of course, everybody has an agenda. In fact, what people are saying is Russia and China are out to get bigger bites of Africa. That's their own objective. That seems to be glaring at this time. I mean, we don't know. I'm not in their cabinet.
So Africa is the cake, and they're trying to get a big chunk.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, very quickly, just before we go, reviving the grain deal, Ukraine seeks more export venues?
Yeah, so I mean, they're doing well, so we're expecting a meeting in Istanbul, Turkey, to revive the grain deal, and we do hope that it works out. But so far, Romania has been using a lot of, in fact, according to Ukraine, the first ship is in Turkey now. They're going through the port, the alternative port, with Romania also creating more infrastructure. So they seem to be finding some alternative that's working at this time, even though it still needs more development. But I mean, the grain deal will be the best, and we wish them all the best. Or we wish us all the best as they meet in Istanbul, because it affects everyone at the end of the day.
Indeed. What affects one of us affects all of us.
All of us, yes.
Thanks, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
Ini John Mecca, business correspondent, Channels Television. And when we come back, more on this BRICS meeting starting tomorrow. Head of Russia's VTB Bank, Andrei Kostin, says BRICS countries play a pivotal role in creating independent global financial system. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the final stretch of today's coverage of Russian invasion of Ukraine. Russia's state space corporation Roscosmos says Moscow's first moon mission in 47 years failed after its Nuller 25 spacecraft spun out of control, smashed into the moon. Roscosmos said it had lost contact with the craft shortly after a problem occurred as the craft was shunted into pre-landing orbit on Saturday. It adds that a commission involving representatives of several agencies will be assembled to establish the reasons for the loss of the probe. Failure for the Prestige mission underscores the decline of Russia's space power since the glory days of Cold War competition, when Moscow was the first to launch a satellite to orbit the Earth, the Sputnik 1, in 1957. And the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man to travel into space in 1961. According to Russian space officials, Russia has not attempted a moon mission since Luna 24 in 1976, when Leonid Brezhnev ruled the Kremlin. Luna 25 was supposed to execute a soft landing on the south pole of the moon on August the 21st. Russia has been racing against India, whose spacecraft is scheduled to land on the moon's south pole this week, and more broadly against China and the United States, which both have advanced nuclear ambitions. And finally on the program, the head of the Russia VTB Bank, Andrei Kostin, says BRICS countries consisting of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa play a pivotal role in creating an independent global financial system that will incorporate currencies of developing countries in key trade settlements. Speaking in an interview, Mr. Carson says the BRICS countries' total gross domestic product, GDP, accounts for more than 1/3 of the world's total, which highlights that the de-dollarization process is speeding up towards a more equitable trading system. The VTB Bank chairman noted that many countries are motivated in reducing their reliance on the dollar and the euro to avert Western sanctions, given that the United States and some European Union major economies have long been abusing sanctions and pursuing hegemonic policies. The summit holds from August the 22nd to the 24th, 2023.
Well, the financial market of BRICS countries are becoming more important, not only for VTB or Russia, it's for the world. BRICS economies represent today 31.5% of the global GDP. This is more than the GDP of G7, which is only 30%. And it means that, of course, there's a growing economic force. BRICS countries should establish, in my opinion, the independent financial market, independent financial system. The United States and the European Union started to use their currencies, in particular dollar, as a weapon. And a weapon for not only political but military reasons. And it's becoming more and more dangerous for the rest of the world to keep reserves or to make settlement in dollars or even euro. And that's why I explained that the process of de-dollarization is speeding up now. Many countries started to trade in the local currency. For example, Russia and China already in our bilateral trade, the level of yuan and ruble reached 80%.
So if the GDP of BRICS countries, who are 5 in number, is greater than the GDP of the G7, who are 7, then countries will be paying attention to this summit beginning from tomorrow. Many thanks for watching today's edition of Russian Invasion of Ukraine. Thanks to our guests and our viewers, our producers as well. Do have a good day, and please join us again for a fresh edition tomorrow. I'm Alumde Macaulay.